see her either. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces in the crowd tonight. This is the May 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. Welcome to everyone. We have a lot to get through tonight, so we'll start, as we usually do, with a poetry reading. I believe we have a special guest tonight, Joan Barasowska. Welcome.
Right here? Yes.
Great.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm thanking Liza Wolfe Francis, the Carrboro Poet Laureate, and thank you for this unique tradition. Perhaps you've noticed, and you certainly will now, that in front of Town Hall, there's a huge 150-year-old elm tree. Well, for Earth Day this year in Carrboro, the artist Catherine Kays created an art installation that circles the trunk of the elm tree. It's made of natural materials. You can see it when you leave the meeting, and because it's natural materials, it's degraded a little by now, but it's still beautiful. So Catherine asked me to write a poem for the occasion about the tree. And I'll read it for you now. Written in collaboration with the art installation Seated at the Table Number 1 by Catherine Kays. Mother Elm. Sacred to our town, you rear above us in years and height, solitary now, a totem of the forest long before you were a fragile sapling. In darkness, a darker mesh of leaves and branches throws shadows to the ground. By day, cool shade. Who hears your song? You speak in words only your tribe translates. Once I leaned against you listening. If only it were given me to understand, what secrets would I hear? Our mother elm, from buried roots, through stolid trunk, to heavy arching boughs, to finest twigs, each vein running through each leaf, utters light breath, bright life. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
For being with us. All right, we have a handful of folks signed up to speak this evening. I'm just going to go, I think I've grouped them together by topic, but then otherwise I'll go in order by how people signed up, and I'll start with John McGowan. Welcome. And for those who are planning to speak, we'll just remind you that we do ask speakers to keep their comments to no more than 3 minutes. I'll have a timer, and then I'll start waving my hands at you.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is John McGowan. I live in the Fair Oaks neighborhood on Waverly Forest Lane. And I'm here this evening to speak to the resolution that's in front of the council later in this meeting on the transportation priorities. And I'm here to say that I commend the council and hope we can move forward with dispatch in the creation of bicycle lanes and pathways for bicycles in Carrboro. I think the electric bicycle is going to be a revolution, and it's coming fast, and we're going to need to make it safe for people to use the electric bikes, and they're going to use them in lieu of cars for lots of things. I'm a commuter myself by bicycle. I'm also a recreational bicyclist, so of course I'm also happy that we're going to do something about the road out to Calvander, which is terrifying every time that you're on it. The only other reason I wanted to speak to this resolution was to, of course, ask you to act as quickly as possible, and also, obviously, the coordination with the town of Chapel Hill is going to be crucial because the boundaries between the two towns are porous, and lots of the commuting and other activities by electric bike are going to take place between the two towns. I also, unfortunately, despite the fact of being a cyclist, do own a car, sometimes have to get in it. In living in Fair Oaks, I'm at that intersection of West Main and C-54 very often, and I have to say I'm a little bit skeptical about that part of the list. I don't quite see why we need a major road reinvent there. And I know there are trade-offs, and the expense of road projects is huge. I'd love to see that money go instead to prioritizing the safety of cyclists. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us tonight. All right, next up is Duncan Morgan. Welcome, Duncan.
Technology doesn't fail me, I should be okay. Stop. Put that image up in just that. Not sure how. My name's Duncan Morgan. I live at 105 Fidelity Street, just around the corner. Thanks. I moved to the area in the 80s as a 10-year-old, and for the last decade have lived in White Oak Apartments with my beautiful wife and our 3 children. As someone who has spent a lot of quality time on the meadow over the last 10 years, has been following the issue, these are some of my observations and opinions. The surrounding community is already using the meadow for recreational purposes, which underscores the people's desire for an easily accessible green space at this location. Walkable outdoor spaces such as this encourage community gathering where neighbors can meet and get to know each other. This has been stated before, but bears repeating. Designating the Fidelity Meadow as a Carrboro park would support the town's climate action plan goal to, and I quote, preserve, protect, and restore natural areas and ecologically sensitive and productive areas through all feasible means. Plans and policies will improve equity by increasing the community's access to experiencing natural places, especially for those who currently have less access. There are approximately 1,000 residents living within a quarter mile of this space who would be positively impacted by the preservation of the meadow and subsequent designation as a Carrboro park. The combo option, which has been suggested, drastically reduces the open green space and eliminates the ability to create a natural buffer between the cemetery and what could be a designated park. This will ultimately render the park space unappealing to anyone who wants to spend some time outdoors there, especially with kids. Jamarius spoke at the last meeting about taking his young daughter onto the green shortly after moving to Hillmont Apartments at the end of Fidelity. That really resonated with me. It reminded me of all the times I did exactly the same thing when our kids were that age. We weren't stargazing, but instead spent a lot of time hunting for treasure, flying kites, picking dandelions, and just generally letting them run free and be kids. It's my sincere hope that other Carrboro parents in the near and distant future will have these same opportunities. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, next up is, we've ridden the bus together for years, and I can never remember how to pronounce your first name. Is it Quay? Yeah, okay. Come on up. Welcome, Quay Trimble.
Good evening, Mayor Siles and esteemed town of Carrboro council members. My name is Quay Trimble. My son Bodie and I have lived on Fidelity Street since 2018. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all tonight about something very, very important to me and the community that I call my home. Our Make Carrboro Parks Groups petition asks that you save all 5.5 open acres on Fidelity for a big park like the ones that lie on the north side of town, north of Main Street. Tonight I'll present our ideas for features that could be next to a cemetery once some screening grows in. Most important, we hope you will choose a bushy evergreen native species when you replace the pear trees. This will maximize future flexibility. These screening plants are shown with the letters A in the layout. This open green space is on the south side of Fidelity, east of the Davy Graveyard. Here's a list of some features that we think would be nice in this space. I'm going to go through each one of these now. Picnic tables. So the B's on the layout show picnic tables. This is a fairly standard feature that you'll find in a park, offering visitors a place to rest and to enjoy the company of fellow humans. The next item, that's my personal favorite, is the community garden. Just for some background, I worked with the city of Myrtle Beach prior to moving here and with Keep America Beautiful to create a community garden in Myrtle Beach proper. People lined up to build community in a place that's overrun with tourists, and it worked, and it's thriving to this day. The next item on the list is a jogging trail. This is represented or illustrated with the letter D on the illustration here. It's a great idea. We all know that there's a direct correlation between wealth and health. In fact, with over 2.5 acres of woods surrounding this meadow, I think that jogging path distance could be doubled. The next item is a paved path for wheelchairs. This is illustrated with the letter E. It goes sort of through the middle of the meadow. The next item would be benches. This is represented with the letter F underneath the existing trees that you see there next to Fidelity Street. We think a dog run would be a fantastic amenity to have here, represented with the letter G. I, for one, would use this amenity daily, and I'm sure will the countless dog parents that I encounter on the sidewalk every day. We also think that a playground would be a fantastic amenity to have. With all the kids I see running around White Oak and Fidelity Court, this feature will get used. And let me tell you, parents will rejoice for not needing to get in their cars to drive to one of the other parks north of Main Street for their children to go to a playground. Just to note that we located the dog park and the playground in sort of the far left corner, which is the furthest part away from, or the furthest location away from the cemetery. It's sort of protected by a rise that runs through the driveway.
So if you'll start to wrap up, please.
Sir. Another item, letter G or J, would represent a yoga platform that could also be used for ceremonies or astronomy. And the last item would be the open field, represented by letter K. To wrap up my presentation, I'll just say that a park in this part of town would be an investment in the health of lower income populations for generations to come. In addition, leaving this tract of land as open green space would support the town of Carrboro continuing to ensure that all people have equitable access to parks and open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Coy. All right, next on the list on this topic is Dr. Rodney Coleman. Pastor Coleman, welcome.
To our council members, my purpose or aim is to not delegitimize one's opinion of needing a park, but to give voice to the need for families to be accommodated during the darkest hours of their lives. Death is inevitable, and it is understood to be a part of life. And even though it is common, it is still very disheartening. It's heart-wrenching. Historically, slaves during the Middle Passage were not even respected enough to be provided with proper burial. If they expired prior to reaching the land, they were often dumped overboard. In the African American culture, community, proper burial is revered as sacred. It is something that we don't take lightly. Just as community for the living is important, it is also important to the African American community and other cultures for the ones who have passed. African Americans have historically used the cemetery to tell the stories of families. These graves are more than just plots or placements, but they are chronicled history markers that not only share a person's birth and death, but also it contains a dash for people to converse and dialogue, and that dash signifies their lives. Historically, you will find that Westwood Cemetery is loved by the African American community. If you were to visit the Westwood Cemetery, you will find that persons' graves are not haphazardly scattered around the cemetery, but they are clumped in family units. They are positioned next to those who have passed before them. For families who visit these family sections, these groups, these graves provide comfort as it reminds them and those who visit a visual representation of the closeness of families that we share in both life and death. It's not to be viewed as secular, but cemeteries are actually sacred. They are hallowed grounds. And even though cemeteries may seem to be something that people just pass by, it is a viable part of our culture. This place is not common. It is culture. Particularly, it's important to our culture. Again, this is not to suggest that parks are not important. This is to suggest that while graves are the resting places for the dead, it's also a place of reflection for the living who have a right to have a place, a convenient place where they and their families can come spend time with their loved ones who have passed, to have conversations about memories that bring us comfort in our dire hours. I saw the slogan, "Build parks, not graves." This slogan hurts. It hurts African Americans who have particularly been pushed on the outskirts of town. I'll say in closing, we're not asking that you build graves. We're asking that you preserve what was deemed as sacred years ago when it was purchased with a purpose.
Thank you, Reverend Coleman. Nice to see you. Next on the list is Meg Morgan. I don't have another person on this topic signed up other than you. Okay. Your time is now, Meg.
I wasn't sure. This is okay.
Right. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Meg Morgan. I also live at 105 Fidelity Street. Duncan and I love meeting our neighbors, especially after the pandemic. It's pretty easy in White Oak, but without a green space, we'd almost never meet our neighbors at the other side of the street. It's because of the Fidelity Meadow that we met Jay and Precious, who also have school-age kids. This year, I feel especially motivated to meet as many neighbors and touch as much grass as possible. I wasn't sure if I wanted to share this until now. I've only told a handful of my close friends. Last July, after years of mystery health issues, a CT scan came back showing a football-sized mass on and surrounding my kidney. The doctor who gave me the news said it didn't look good. For most of August, I was in a state of panic, and I had to consider where my body would go if treatment wasn't an option. Thankfully, after 7 months of chemo and radiation, I'm in remission. I was talking to a friend who also lives in White Oak, and she's one of the nicest, sweetest people you could ever hope to meet, and she's been through a lot. She said she likes to walk around Fidelity Meadow because it's close to home and it's a beautiful place for daily walks. I agree. In a former life, I was a musician. Now I just sing to the trees. The other day, I was walking along the edge of the meadow where it meets the forest, thinking about mortality, the state of the world, climate change, my kids, pieces of the natural world that have been lost just in our lifetime. But then I looked up at the clouds nestled in the Carolina blue sky, stretching the expanse of the meadow, and I couldn't get this song out of my head. Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time takes you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the test of the best and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end, that's why, right? I hope you had the time of your life. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for your comments, Meg. Thanks for coming out tonight. Is there anyone else who came to speak tonight on the topic of Westwood Cemetery? Yes? Okay. Lori, do you want to start first? Or Liz? Stand together? Okay. Thanks for coming out tonight, y'all. It's good to see you. I'm going to set the usual timer, but since there's both of you, you can take advantage of the time you have.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, Town of Carrboro staff. My name is Lori Clark, and I live on Jones Ferry Road. My family has been in Orange County for 8 generations, here in Carrboro for 7. And I'm here to talk about the sacredness of the cemetery. It is within walking distance of my house, and I visit that place often for a number of reasons, one of which is that as early as 1984, my great aunt was laid to rest there. And the latest person in my family, my cousin, who was like an aunt, Harriet Barbie, was laid to rest there in 2012. And my mom is 89 and is still with us. But she has already purchased her plot there. And it's a sacred space where I believe should remain sacred. And while I'm not opposed to park space and people having green space in Carrboro, I know there are lots of places where you can do that. I think the surrounding area should be maintained for burial space. And one of the reasons I'm so adamant about it being expanded is that oftentimes when you want to go visit your loved ones, we were just there the other day looking at our family members that are there, and there are quite a few Barbies that are laid to rest. It's a time of introspection and reflection. And, you know, while families are there with enjoying outdoor space, that can be distracting for someone who's going through pain or who just wants to spend some quiet time. So I ask that you consider the cemetery instead of a green space and a park. And I'll lend time for Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Carter. I am currently a member of the Equity Commission here in the town of Carrboro, but I am also a living legend for the town of Carrboro and Chapel Hill. I'm 72 years old. I can't envision Westwood becoming a park because, unfortunately, 2 years ago, Dr. Coleman had the honor of doing the services for my 55-year-old niece. She had cared for me when I was going through COVID. Unfortunately, I had not heard from her in a week. And I said to my son, Rodney, could you please go check on Ring because I've not heard from her. Little did I know that he would go in and have to threaten her and her persons that were waiting for us to get there with kicking the door down. She died 2 years ago, March. I never got to see her again because I was going through COVID. I also have friends and family members that are there because if you all, particularly you all that have been on town council for any length of time, know that part of Chapel Hill Cemetery was sold for supposedly public low-income housing. So they're limited space. Death is very sacred to us. So I would hope that we continue to use the Martin Luther King Park and look for other green spaces. Thank you for entertaining us tonight, and please consider our thoughts, because We're about pushed out of this town. People of color are about pushed out of this town. We can't afford to live in high-rise homes. So don't continue to push us all the way out of what I consider to be home. I was born down on Broad Street in Carrboro, so I have some history here. I also have some say. Thank you.
I hear you. Thank you so much for being here, both of you.
Thank you.
I want to appreciate all the residents who came out to speak on this topic tonight. Just ask the town manager, Mr. Manager, I believe that our May work session is going to be pretty much taken up entirely with budget matters, the town budget, which is coming up, deadline's coming up. Are you planning to have the next work session be dedicated to the Westwood Cemetery topic?
Yes, there's space to do that on the June work session agenda.
So then our plan, council members and folks who are listening, is to hold a work session as we had previously directed staff to do on this topic, to come back with some of the information that we requested the last time we had this item on our agenda, and to do that on our June work session. As far as I know, Mr. Manager, there is no other agenda item relating to this matter coming up between now and then. We have no action to take on the Westwood Cemetery issue.
No.
So just so you know kind of the sense of the timeline of between now and the next work session council will have. And that should be the second Tuesday in June for those who are interested. Okay. Thanks again for coming out. I do have at least one other speaker signed up on a different topic, so I'm going to move on to that now. That is, find my place, Drew Kelly. Welcome back, Drew.
I just wanted to talk about Bowling Creek phases 3 and 4. So I know there was like a working session 2.5 months ago, and 5 weeks ago, I think we made a decision to move forward with the engagement process. So just wanted an update on where things stand, if that's happening soon. I think the concern for a lot of residents is we have an end date, but we don't yet know what the engagement process will be, when it starts. So that was just a question.
Thanks very much, Drew. Mr. Manager, do you have a response to that?
Yes, information will be coming forward next week about the plans to move forward for that engagement process.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Clerk.
sorry to interrupt. I had a email about a comment from Mr. Waller. Was there going to be a slideshow or for public comment?
Are there any other speakers for?
Oh, next week. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just so you know, next week's council meeting will be a work session, which means there will not be a public comment period. So we'll have to wait till the following Tuesday, which is the 24th. But yeah, come on and do it tonight if you want to do that. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. My name is Jamarius Waller, live in Hillmont at Fidelity and Davie. On Saturday at the farmers market, we passed petitions asking the public to help save all of the Fidelity open space for a park. One signer, honestly. Okay. One signer thought Westwood had honestly been an African American cemetery. From 1948 to 1968, it was deemed only for the Caucasian race. It only honestly started in 1988, where African Americans have been getting buried there for over 20 years. Also, in the same year, the council voted 7-0 to offer most of the open field to the Postal Service. The leader of that effort was a council member. Hillard Caldwell. The Postal Service was requesting an access road from Davie to the back of their lot. It would have been bringing in mail overnight, disturbing the peaceful resting places of spirits lingering around zones 1 and 2. But a neighborhood group got strong results in the council election in 1989 that convinced the council to back out of the deal. This land wouldn't be available for anything if our earlier group hadn't worked to save it. Since 1989, this council has considered putting a library there and also more affordable housing and the public works yard. So the statement made here on February 7th, this land has always been purposed for a cemetery, is honestly nowhere near being accurate in any type of way. Honestly, they're just waiting to find a way to fill up what I feel as though the council would consider just another empty space waiting to help be built towards the future. At this point, honestly, it's getting confusing and out of hand. In 1989, a prominent black leader was advocating to bring in large diesel trucks nightly, but now, in the year of 2023, another prominent black leader wants to expand the graveyard so that we won't have any more nice large green space in any type of way, unlike those on the other side of town. Today, I saw Wilson and MLK parks for the first time, and there isn't any way Town Commons compares to those parks. I have a
Artist, you've reached your 3 minutes, so try to wrap it up, please.
I think that's going to be all for now. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming out tonight. It's good to see you again. Okay, we don't have any other speakers signed up tonight, so I think we're going to move on to our regular agenda. All right. Councilmember Fouché.
So there's not proclamation or announcement of.
There will be a proclamation.
Oh, okay.
We were having a guest for that, and I was
I'm sorry.
waiting for them to arrive. Thank you for the reminder, because I would have skipped it. Thank you. So again, on the Westwood Cemetery issue, we'll have a work session on the second Tuesday in June, and look forward to seeing folks that night. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Barbara, for that reminder. I was just about to skip it. Maggie, are you here? I do see Maggie. Will you join me at the podium, please?
Damon, I guess one thing we should have reminded folks is if it's a work session.
We'll make that clear to them. I guess maybe for the record, I'll just repeat that for work sessions, we don't have public comment. Bob? I just want to let folks know, including those who may be watching later, that when I mention a work session, those are periods for the council to discuss the topic, but there won't be public comment. But you're more than welcome to come join us and listen in. Right. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for coming tonight.
It's my pleasure.
All right. This is a proclamation of Small Business Week. And Maggie Funkhauser is the new-ish chair of the Carrboro Business Alliance and the manager of the Carrboro Farmers Market. So is here representing the Business Alliance today. Thanks for being here. Whereas the U.S. Small Business Administration sponsors National Small Business Week every year to recognize the contributions of entrepreneurs and small business owners. And whereas small businesses are the backbone of the economy, creating jobs, supporting local communities, and fostering innovation. And whereas small businesses account for a significant portion of North Carolina's economy, with more than 934,000 small businesses in the state employing more than 1.7 million people. And whereas small businesses in Carrboro play an essential role in supporting a vibrant community, making up 96% of businesses and employing more than 3,350 workers, providing essential services, creating new jobs, and supporting our local economy to help make Carrboro a wonderful place to live, work, and do business. And whereas many people still dream of starting their own business, and there are numerous sources of assistance, the Small Business Administration provides loans and free counseling. In North Carolina, organizations and programs such as Business Link Carolina, Carolina Small Business Development Fund, the Small Business Center Network of the North Carolina Community College System, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, and others can help prospective business owners learn how to start a business. And whereas the town's Economic Development Department, represented here by Director John Hartman Brown, thanks for being here tonight, John, supports the business community with a special emphasis on locally owned businesses by serving as an information hub to help businesses succeed, administering loan programs to support job creation, business retention, and energy efficiency, partnering with the Carrboro Tourism Development Authority, the Chapel Hill Orange County Visitors Bureau, and the Carrboro Business Alliance to promote local businesses, and supporting networking among and maintaining a listing of Black, Indigenous, and people of color-owned businesses. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the Town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim April 30th through May 6th, 2023 to be Small Business Week in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to support local businesses during this week and throughout the year, appreciating and celebrating the personal touches and unique expertise small businesses offer and the economic resilience they foster. Thanks, Maggie, for being here. Do you want to share some words?
Thank you all very much for having me. I'm delighted to accept this on behalf of the Carrboro Business Alliance Leadership Council. Working with the Farmers Market, I have the pleasure of working with lots of different small businesses, and collaborating as one of the members on the Leadership Council has also given me the distinct pleasure of working with Carrboro-only businesses. So I really appreciate this, everything that you all do to foster small businesses in Carrboro. Thank you.
John wanted to get a picture. Is that right, John?
Oh, it's photo op, okay.
Is this where you want to see?
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Clerk will now do the announcement of upcoming meetings.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Got a couple meeting announcements here. First up, we have the Stormwater Advisory Commission meeting tomorrow, May 3rd at 7 p.m., and that will be virtual. On May 4th, we have several. I'm just going to read them all at one time because they all start at the same time. They start at 7:30, and they're all virtual. It is the Appearance Commission, Environmental Advisory Board, Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee, Planning Board meeting, and Transportation Advisory Board meeting, which that is the joint review meeting that they're having. That's why they're all the same. On May 8th, we have the Recreation and Parks Commission meeting. That's going to be at 6 p.m. It'll start at the Century Center, and they're also doing some park site tours during that meeting. And then next Tuesday, we have the Town Council meeting, which will be a work session at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall. I did want to go ahead and remind everyone about the Advisory Board Appreciation Dinner, which is scheduled for Thursday, May 11th. It starts at 6 p.m. If any Advisory Board members are listening, make sure you RSVP. You've received some invites. We've mailed a few as well. And then Council also, make sure you RSVP as well. Did I do that?
Thank you very much, Wesley.
I'll remind you.
Just note that tomorrow is Bike and Walk to School Day in Carrboro. I'll be meeting some Carrboro Cubs at Wilson Park very, very early in the morning. So if anybody want to wake up early and join me, you're welcome to do this. We're meeting at Wilson Park. We're going to bike and walk over to Carrboro Elementary first thing. Tomorrow is also a birthday for a couple of council members who maybe I won't mention, but happy birthday to them.
We should mention. Who?
Councilmember Nowell and Councilmember Haven O'Donnell have the same birthday.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday to you!
So I thought there was one other thing I was going to mention, but that was the main thing. Tomorrow's Bike and Walk to School Day. Bike and walk to school if you can do so safely, and I hope to see everybody out there. All right, any other town meetings coming up that we need to acknowledge, Susan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, couple of things. The Wilson Park, the bike and ride to school day at Wilson Park. Did you have a time for that other than bright first
I
thing in the
do.
morning?
7:15.
7:15. And then one other time, Wesley, is the Northern Transition Area Advisory Commission was actually meeting at 6:30. I think you said 7:30 on Thursday. And then one other meeting to add is that the Local Government Affordable Housing Collaborative is meeting on Thursday at 5:30.
Thank you, Susan. All right, and I'm not seeing any others, so we'll move on. We've done public comment because the mayor got ahead of himself. So we will move on to the consent agenda, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on the consent agenda is request to set a legislative public hearing on a text amendment relating to complete streets. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that the town council set a public hearing on a text amendment to land use ordinance to establish a complete streets policy. The town council must receive public comment before making a decision. A resolution setting a public hearing for June 6, 2023 is provided. The next item is an update on the development of the draft 2026-2035 STIP and consideration of transportation projects for prioritization 7.0. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the town council with an update on the development of the 2026 through 2035 State Transportation Improvement Program, the prioritization schedule, and the proposed list of town projects for consideration for P7.0. The next item is a request to submit a STIP amendment to allocate local discretionary funds to Phase 1 of the Morgan Creek Greenway. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that the town council authorize staff to submit a request for an amendment to NCDOT's State Transportation Improvement Program to allocate local discretionary funds to Phase 1 of the Morgan Creek Greenway. And the next item is Affordable Housing Advisory Commission funding recommendations. The purpose of this agenda item is for the town council to consider approving recommended funding for 2 nonprofit applications to the Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund. The next item is approval of the 2023-24 Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Plan Activities. The purpose of this agenda item is for the town council to consider approving the Home Investment Partnership Program's Annual Plan Activities for FY 2023 through 2024. The next item is a budget amendment to accept contributions for the Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Resource Department's Active Life programs. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that the town council adopt a budget amendment to accept and appropriate a $5,000 contribution made to the town by Carroll Woods Retirement Community to support the Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Resources Department's Active Life programs. And the final item is appointment of the Economic Sustainability Commission member to the Racial Equity Commission. And the purpose of the agenda item is to request that the town council make the appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Eleazar,
I was going to move to approve the agenda.
Randy, and then Tammy, and then Danny.
Yeah, I had a quick question about number 2, and I know that we've raised some questions. I guess it's about 3. No, I'm sorry, I have a quick question on 1. I think the questions we were raising were with number 2.
1 and 2. Sammy?
5.
Danny?
I was pulling 2.
So we'll, Eleazar, amend your motion to approve items 3, 4, 6, and 7. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Randy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is adopted. Okay, so we'll do, Randy, you had a quick question on number 1.
Yeah. I would just like to add for the complete streets that the Carrboro, the REC, the Race Equity Commission, also be involved in taking a look at the complete street.
Got a comment?
Same topic?
Yeah. I would also like the EAB to consider it. And along with that, I noticed that the findings don't mention anything about the climate emergency we're in and complete streets. And the findings are very thorough. I think we're missing that. So when we revisit this as a public hearing, I'm requesting that staff include a finding that speaks to climate emergency and how complete streets relate to it.
Did it not also go to the climate action team?
They don't really do kind of like, more like EA.
They're an action team. Okay, so we have recommendations from Randy and Sammy that we include referral of this, these amendments to the Racial Equity Commission and to the Environmental Advisory Board, with a note in particular from Sammy that climate finding be included in discussions. This matter is brought back to the council.
With those items, I'll move that resolution.
Moved with them as amended by Sammy, seconded by Susan. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Did you get that, Wesley? Okay, thanks. Okay, item number 2. So there were some questions that came up by email, Mr. Manager, on this item, and I know that you had some responses from staff. I'm guessing that there were some questions remain. So this is the item on the transportation projects list for the SPOT 7-point process. Maybe start with the easy one, which is more of a sort of timeline process question that Sammy raised. Sammy, did you get an answer to that question that was adequate?
I did get it. I guess, so my question had to do with whether we could, what it would take if we could include another item, what our timeline is for that. And the staff's response was that it needs to be included already, like these prioritizations are items that are already in the MPO.
Right.
And so now my follow-up question is, how hard is it to amend the MPO?
So for the SPOT process, maybe we should invite Tina, is that okay, Mr. Manager, to come up and make sure I'm not saying this wrong. The SPOT process, I think the submittals all have to happen this summer. And then it goes into this big data analysis scoring process that takes several months. And then the output of that analysis comes back to the MPO board or to the MPO to see how the project's scored. So really, once you're in that point, you've kind of gone beyond the point of adding projects. But Tina, maybe you can correct all of the things things I just said in error.
Thank you. That was a good summary. I think you've covered the highlights. This is a very quick turnaround this year. I think some of you may remember we brought, I think, 3 items to you for P6. And so this has been a little bit of a surprise, and a good reason for that is that DOT has been really struggling with their finances, and a lot of the projects that were submitted for P6, well, the assumption is that almost all of the projects for P6 will simply be resubmitted. This is kind of a small window to include any potential new projects. So if you have them, this is the time.
Just a clarification. From what I understand, the response to my question, it was that if a project is not included in local or regional plans, including the MTP, an amendment to those plans to include the project would be needed for it to advance to this SDIP.
That is correct.
Is it an amendment to the MTP? Is it too late to do that?
So all of these plans are kind of on these continuous cycles of, the CTP is updated every so many years. The MTP is updated every so many years. You have an opportunity to do amendments. I'm being a little vague, and I don't mean to, but I think we can always ask for that. But I think it's important to just understand that that amendment would have to kind of hit the sequence such that an amendment could go in prior to something being programmed.
But for the purposes of this STIP that y'all are asking us about today, it's too late in that process for amending the MTP has already passed, or?
They're two separate processes, and I'll just sort of add to what Tina shared. This list that we're moving forward with here is the projects we want to include in what's called the SPOT prioritization process. What ends up on that list will end up in the MTP eventually.
Oh, okay.
But the MTP and the CTP and all that are sort of continually updated over periods of years, and there are opportunities to make amendments to those documents, but that's separate from this prioritization process.
Okay, so my interest specifically is we, in 2009, decided on our greenway, which includes phases 3 and 4. And currently, the council's discussing what alignment exactly. But I would be interested in us including those portions of the plan with the assumption that, you know, we're going to clarify what alignment exactly. So is it too late to do that? I mean, tonight we're considering this. Is that something we could include?
You know, usually when you have a project that you want to enter, you have a little bit more information about it. You do have an alignment. You can begin to develop an estimate. You know, you have a general sense of the beginning and the end point. Will right-of-way be, you know, you're able to put together an estimate. What will it be a boardwalk? Will it be a paved surface? Do you have easements, or do you need to acquire right-of-way? Do you have permission? You know, those are the types of things that you usually use to put together an estimate that becomes the basis for submitting a project for SPOT.
Okay.
And so while the CTP tends to be the more pie in the sky document, the MTP is something that needs to be fiscally constrained. That's why projects need to be in the MTP, or at least in another locally adopted plan, to be put in the STIP, because the STIP likewise needs to be fiscally constrained. So you have that fiscal, you have both kind of the scope and description of the project, but also that financial piece.
So in summary, it sounds like, you know, the council's intention is to make a decision by October, and there's a lot of details that we're including here would have to be, which sounds like we probably won't have.
Probably not.
Okay, that's a good answer.
You know, I think what's important to understand is that, again, all these things are on a cycle. So typically, the STIP process goes, or the DOT goes through this prioritization project process every 2 to 3 years. So there's another opportunity to revisit this, you know, in the future if that's an interest.
Thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Tina. Randy, do you have a comment?
I have a comment. You know, I'm just going to say that to even put it out there about Boland 3 and 4 ahead of the engagement process and say a decision will be made in October is basically undermining the democratic process by which we have promised the community they will engage. I just want to caution you all that what is being said right now is that it's a fait accompli, is not true. That's misleading, it's misguiding, and it's prejudicial. And I just want to say that because the community is watching carefully about how we conduct democracy.
There can be plenty of time to discuss this particular issue. Do you have your question answered, Tammy? Is that adequate?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that, you know, we did make a motion as a body, and I would encourage folks to look at that in response to Ames tonight.
Okay, one other, while you're up there, Tina, there was one other set of question about one of the projects that's on the list. I know it's been on the list before. It's not a new project, so I just want us all to acknowledge that as a council that we have approved all of the things on this list before. These are not new. But there have been some questions raised about, in particular, the Super Street concept and whether that's appropriate for the 54 and Old Fayetteville intersection. Can you tell us a little bit more about the staff agenda abstract said that staff is actually reevaluating whether a Super Street design is what you really want to do there. Right. And so I'm wondering, what is it that's being submitted to SPOT for the SPOT prioritization? And is there a way to back off of any commitment to that particular design and instead just indicate an interest in improving the intersection?
Sure. As you may recall, we actually submitted an intersection improvement for the intersection of Old Fayetteville and 54. I think we first submitted that in P4, so 2 or 3 transportation planners ago, and we resubmitted it. It kind of made it as a carrier or as a carryover where it wasn't entirely approved, but it was doing well enough to keep going through the next prioritization cycle. I think it made it to P6. Our reasoning for doing that was that we saw the Lloyd Farm project on the horizon. We knew some improvements would be needed at that intersection, and we weren't quite sure how that would all move forward. As it turned out, the Lloyd Farm project was approved, and their TIA identified essentially the improvements we were seeking at that intersection, so that they would be responsible for paying for that. And at the time, it appeared that that project was on schedule to be finished before DOT would have gotten to do those improvements anyway. So we were simply going to kind of toss out that project. And MPO staff said, well, you know, rather than just give away a slot, so to speak, is there a way that you could reformulate that to still meet your interests? And we knew from the Lloyd Farm project that there was an interest in having a more complete, full movement, if you will, in that mid-block entrance to Lloyd Farm. And so we thought, well, perhaps this is a way that we could explore that concept with DOT, as well as kind of revisit that intersection and that the way that the side path project works. We had had several conversations with DOT throughout this process about that whole corridor, including the endpoint with the intersection. And so with that in mind, we submitted it. Super Street was kind of the general term that they were using at that point. I think the current term is a, now I'm blanking out on it. It's I'm going to look at Patrick's on. It's, no, it wasn't that. It was the reduced conflict. That's it. Thank you. It was, they're now calling it more of a reduced conflict. Again, seeking a way to get that one turn. And so our understanding is we can submit it. It would be DOT funded. If we decide we don't like the design, we can pull back and say we don't want it. And so that was the reason that we.
So there will be clarity in the process of discussing this in the technical committee and through this prioritization process, that there is not a commitment by the town to a Super Street design necessarily, that this is really just trying to figure out the movement in that.
And that was really the reason. There was no relationship to the widening project or anything like that. It was real. Our focus really was to try to get more of the community interest related to the Lloyd Farm development.
Mm-hmm. Great. I will make a note. I know there were some concerns from a couple of residents about what this potential link was to some people's interest in widening Highway 54 west of Carrboro. The town council has for many years opposed a widening of 54 west of Carrboro. I don't believe that position has changed on this council, and it will continue to oppose as it makes its way through the spot prioritization process. I know you all are working on that as well, but I just want to make that clear that for folks who are listening, that is not an interest of the council, and we'll continue to oppose it. Thank you, Tina. Appreciate you. Is there a motion to approve resolution in attachment A for this item?
Move it.
Who did I hear over here? Was it Eleazar or Barbara?
Aye.
Eleazar, and seconded by Randy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Somebody wanted to ask a question about item 5. Is that Sammy?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to thank staff for the response to my question that had to do with what the 10-year allocation from home funds has been to Carrboro. And we typically put up 15%. It's linked to our population in this county. And I shared with staff, I shared with everyone. I'm trying to find it. Firstly, I would like for staff to include that kind of information annually when the home updates are provided, so that future councils can know how we're doing in terms of how much of that are we receiving back home funds. In that current analysis, I shared with staff how I understood how to get at those numbers better. And my calculations, well, firstly, I understand that there's reallocation of the $105,000 for empowerment in fiscal year 2022, 2023, because that was being paid for by the county. In essence, home funds were zero for Carrboro, correct? Is that correct? Okay, so accounting for that, I calculated of total funds, what percentage has come to Carrboro over the past 12 years. And instead of a 15%, it's at 9.6%. And I think it's very important for us to keep those numbers in mind so that when years such as fiscal year 2022, 2023 happen, and Carrboro is getting zero, even though we're putting up 15% of our local contribution, that the following year we step it up in terms of like how to balance this out. And it roughly translates over the last 12 years of $332,000 that haven't been invested for affordable housing in Carrboro from those funds. So,
thank you, Sammy. Susan?
Thank you for those comments, Sammy. And I'll just mention one thing. I sit as the council liaison. I sit as I'm the liaison to the Affordable Housing Collaborative. And Anne-Marie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my sense in being on the collaborative is we really do look we try to keep our own, turf and preferences in terms of trying to bring these projects to Carrboro. We really are looking at these applications and trying to decide what is in the best interest of Orange County and what are the most compelling projects, the applications, where are we going to get the biggest bang for the buck. So in that spirit, I just wanted to point out that spirit of the decision making. It truly is done as a collaborative, knowing that some years we may not get money, others we may get more funding than our 15%, but over the long term, we'll all be getting kind of sort of about the same.
mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that this is included in that process, that kind of information. Thanks.
Mr. Manager, thanks for raising that, Sammy. Is there a way to, as we move toward adopting this resolution to approve the plan for the home funds, to also make sure that we're getting on record Sammy's suggestion, really, that as this comes up in the future, that staff is keeping tabs essentially on the numbers that Sammy's talking about?
Yes, just make it a part of the motion to approve the item.
Entertain a motion to approve the resolution in attachment A, as well as Sammy's recommendation to staff to include keeping track of Carrboro's share of affordable housing home funds year over year, compared to the contribution that we're making to the program.
And to include it in the end report.
Yeah.
To include that information in the end report.
I'll move that.
There, 1 second, Barbara. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Seconded by Barbara. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor. And so I appreciate Councilmember Slade bringing that up. And so it reminded me, I don't remember if it was when we were talking about the landings or something else. But I guess just in general, us keeping track of, how money is being used. Is that even a thing? Or is it, I feel like you and I, Mr. White, may have had this conversation before. I mentioned it, and Councilmember Slade saying it reminded me. I guess it's, kind of like the ARPA money, right? So that's, of course, the federal guidelines, but how closely do we, kind of see how the money is being spent? Not just where Councilmember Slade is talking about, but just in general, or we don't.
In that case, I would have to look at the MOU, and Anne-Marie might speak more about that in terms of the landing and the home trust, what we're required to do in terms of reporting use of the funding. I don't know what, we can look at the MOU to see what it says about
And you
that,
can answer it via email.
Okay.
You don't have to answer it tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Barbara. Okay, it's been moved by Sammy, seconded by Barbara, that we adopt the resolution in attachment A, along with the recommendation from Sammy about reporting on contributions to the home program and in the annual report and what Carrboro is receiving back each year. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thank you. That's the consent agenda, y'all.
Whatever happened to move it into
Right.
the back?
We're going to move on to other matters, Mr. Manager.
Okay, the first item is the annual update from the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness. The purpose of the agenda item is for the town council to receive the 2022 annual report from the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness. And Rachel Walsh, the Orange County Homeless Program Manager, is here to make a presentation.
Welcome, Rachel. Good to see you.
Whole lot, right?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about homelessness in Orange County. Before I get started, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. Again, my name is Rachel Waltz. I've been manager of the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness for going on 2 years. And I've been working in the fields of community mental health and homelessness for about 15 years, both here and in New York City. And the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness is jointly funded by the county and the 3 towns using the population-based formula that was referred to earlier to really ensure that we have a coordinated and systematic response to addressing homelessness and quickly resolving that so that we could ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and one time in our community. Before we get started, I wanted to just thank you for your continued support of the partnership, both the coordination efforts that we are required to provide per HUD, but also your support of the direct service programming that we provide, and your understanding of how these constituent programs and parts really fit together to ensure a systematic response. I also wanted to thank town staff for just your partnership and support, particularly during some of these cold weather months and times that we have experienced a lot of losses as a community. I just really want to thank you. So our goal in delivering the annual report for this year is really a couple-fold. One, to really help illustrate how the pieces and parts fit together a little bit more clearly than I think we have in years past, to both highlight successes within the homeless service system and to really chart a path forward. So first, wanted to start with what homelessness looks like in our community. And, when folks experience a housing crisis, approximately 80% of the time, that crisis resolves on its own within 4 to 6 weeks without ever formally touching the homeless service system. And so that's where the Partnership to End Homelessness, along with the county's housing programs, has a variety of programmatic responses to try to help folks avoid having to formally enter the homeless service system. So that could be funding prevention efforts through emergency housing assistance. It could be diversion, eviction diversion. Our focus within the partnership is really focusing on kind of that center column and then that column on the right-hand side. So when folks have that housing crisis, again, really trying to divert folks from entering the homeless service system because, as many of you all may know, we do not have same-day shelter in our community. When we're not able to be successful in that, we really want to try to have a twofold focus. One, to address the immediate need of where is someone going to stay tonight, get them out of the elements into a safer situation. But then also, how do we quickly resolve that housing crisis and link someone as quickly as possible to permanent housing? So, starting with a bit of a snapshot. I'm going to use a variety of systems and calendar years and federal fiscal years because we like to keep things complicated. But broadly speaking, there were 312 unduplicated folks served through IFC's emergency shelter, which is Home Start, and transitional housing program, which is the community house, in federal fiscal year 2022. So from October of 2021 through the end of September 2022, 312 people were served through shelter. Additionally, 69 households were served through rapid rehousing. That's a significant increase from years past, due in no small part to the significant investments made by this body, by the county, by Hillsborough, and by the use of Emergency Solutions Grant COVID funds. That brought an additional about $600,000 into this area over the last couple of years. 49 households were served through permanent supportive housing. I do want to note that that includes the IFC Permanent Supportive Housing, which is a best practice program. It's really a remarkable program. It also includes households that were served through Community Link, which was a program that was defunded in calendar year 2021 after periods of poor performance, not serving people in a housing first manner, and not providing intensive case management that folks need to be successful in maintaining housing. The street outreach team, so RED, served 111 households in federal fiscal year 2022, And there were over 8,000 households that came into contact with the Housing Helpline in calendar year 2022. The Housing Helpline, which is the front door to the homeless service system, started as kind of a call center in early COVID days, and in summer of 2021 added some in-person services at the Southern Human Services building on Homestead Road, and starting in the summer of 2022 added in-person services at the IFC Commons, right down the road. So that's a snapshot of what our system looks like. To paint a bit more nuance into that picture, and as is I think quite prescient based on some conversations that were had earlier this evening, we are persistently seeing racial disparities throughout the homeless service system. This is a snapshot again of our point in time count, which is a one-night count that happens the last Wednesday of January. And while we know that there are 12% of Orange County residents identify as Black or African American, they made up 55% of people counted on point-in-time count night 2022. I just submitted the point-in-time count and housing inventory count to HUD this past Friday, and there is not much movement in these numbers. I'll have a formal data review event in June, but there's not much change. So to illustrate the kind of pathway that folks come through when they go from a housing crisis that does not resolve on its own into permanent housing. When we talk about coordinated entry and having a systematic response, there's really 4 key components: access and assessment, prioritization that's developed in concert with the community, and then folks actually obtaining permanent housing. And so 524 individuals came through coordinated entry in calendar year 2022. They primarily came through the Housing Helpline, through that phone-based intervention, as well as some of those in-person sites. And then the Street Outreach Harm Reduction and Deflection team also conducts coordinated entry assessments in person, because we know that there are a lot of folks out there who are not going to come in to a front door, are not going to may not have a reliable phone to utilize a call-based system. And it takes sometimes building a relationship over a long period of time to develop trust enough to even answer some of the questions that are required in order to adequately assess folks. Of those 524 people, 378 people said, yes, I'd like to be added to the shelter referral list. Again, because there's no same-day shelter in Orange County, folks who are interested in either community house or home start, in accordance with their wishes under the equal access laws, are added to a shelter referral list that then the IFC case managers will reach out and contact folks when their name comes up. Not everyone who, So next up comes our prioritization, which is in Orange County. We call that the Home Committee, which is a very long, twice-a-month meeting where we literally go kind of name by name of everyone who has both come through coordinated entry and is working with a service provider in our community. That could be the Street Outreach team, that could be the Community Empowerment Fund, UNC Center for Excellence in Community Mental Health, the Compass Center, a variety of service providers. Anyone who can say, yes, I can work with this person, I can support them in a housing search, or link them with another service provider that will get added to that active list. And our median number of folks on our active list in calendar year 2022 was 198 households, our highest ever by pretty significant numbers. And in calendar 2022, 141 households were housed through the Home Committee in that past year. And so that is both, again, we have a variety of tools in our toolkit, and as a smaller community with insufficient inventory of permanent supportive housing, we've had to kind of get creative and help house folks with housing choice vouchers, which is not kind of how the homeless service system has traditionally operated, but we make do where we can. And so for those households who have some really significant case management needs, they were linked to things like permanent supportive housing when we have a slot. I believe there were 2 last year, and linked with rapid rehousing. Again, we've got currently 3 rapid rehousing case managers through Orange County, and then there's another rapid rehousing funded program through Compass that exclusively serves households that are fleeing domestic violence. So in highlighting some of the programs that have really seen significant investments these last couple of years, I wanted to just paint a little bit of a picture of who's getting served by some of these programs. These snapshots are using federal fiscal year data, not calendar year data, so that's where you may see some little bit of difference there number-wise. But the street outreach team served 124 people. Approximately 2/3 of folks were male identified, 1/3 were female identified. Black and African American folks made up about half of the people served by the street outreach team. And a significant number of people are living with multiple health conditions. You know, people who are living unsheltered are much more likely to experience trimorbidities than their sheltered counterparts. And I also just want to highlight that 1/3 of folks who are living unsheltered have household income of $1,000 or more a month. The street outreach team served 45 households in that time frame, similar to street outreach in terms of the gendered breakdown. The rapid rehousing team served more African American folks at 59%, where 1/3 of their clients are identified as white. 2/3 of folks identified as having at least one health condition, and half of households had no income at program entry. The Permanent Supportive Housing Program, this is kind of a more accurate snapshot of where we currently are. So this is the program offerings that the IFC currently has. They serve 19 households. They were more evenly split between male and female identified head of households. We saw that the Permanent Supportive Housing Program, 40% of their client population was African American or Black, compared with significantly higher numbers served by rapid rehousing and people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And 70% of people had one or more health conditions. Again, permanent supportive housing is kind of considered the Cadillac program. It's designed for people who have been living, experiencing homelessness for a year or more, while also having at least one seriously disabling condition that's expected to last for at least a year. And as the name suggests, it is folks are able to receive both rental assistance as well as really intensive case management for as long as they need it. So, wanted to highlight a couple of successes, focusing on, first, just the ways that we've really increased access to the homeless service system. We have a commitment to serving all of the continuum of care, that's all of our geographic confines, and really ensuring that we have continuing to increase access where we may see folks being underrepresented. So we've added, like I mentioned earlier, on-site access points, additional street outreach staff, and have had increasing coordination across sectors through behavioral health and the criminal legal system. There's a Friendly Faces collaborative that kind of cuts across a lot of the different sectors where people experiencing homelessness are likely to interact. We've also had more collaboration. We've brought a lot more partners to the table in terms of representation on the partnership's leadership team over the last year and a half. We've also improved processes to really incorporate feedback from people with lived experience of our systems in a variety of points, both our project reviews or funding recommendations, our point in time count, our gaps analysis, really trying to strengthen our processes to really center and elevate folks. And then we also have been working with partners across other continuums of care, both Durham and Wake counties, to really ensure that programs are truly housing first. There has been a lot of talk around moving backwards, and so we really want to make sure that our programs are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Additionally, we have brought in increased funding. A couple of weeks back, we got the results from the FY22 Continuum of Care grant award from HUD. $870,000 was brought into the community through the Continuum of Care funds, which is the highest amount that we've ever been awarded. We were awarded domestic violence bonus funds, and so we've seen our partners like the Compass Center go from receiving $50,000 when I first came on board 2 years ago to this new grant award brings their total up to $157,000 for domestic violence-focused rapid rehousing. And like I said, we've also been increasing housing. We saw a real sea change with the advent of housing choice vouchers and emergency housing vouchers, and this year we're looking to kind of continue in that trend. So, path forward, I can't talk about successes without talking about the gaps that you see before you in your packets. In order to really have a sustained, systematic response to addressing homelessness, we need significant investments, particularly on the far right end of your screen with permanent supportive housing. We have a lot of people out there still on the streets who are living with a number of chronic conditions, and straight rental assistance on the private market is not going to cut it. We also have additional gaps in help with housing location, furniture and household goods, continued sustained funding for landlord incentives. Our housing access coordinator, Christopher Jackson, has done a great job holding briefings, working with town staff and other partners like the chamber to really listen to landlords, get a sense of what their needs and interests and priorities are, and do what we can to address those. We also continue to have gaps around temporary housing, including our accessible housing-focused shelter, medical respite beds, and bridge housing. Additionally, folks who are living particularly unsheltered need greater access to those service connections that can help them resolve a housing crisis. So that's things like increased and sustainable staffing for our housing helpline, an integrated service center, and the crisis diversion facility. And then finally, again, the conversations earlier were really prescient, thinking about people experiencing homelessness are much more likely to die an early death than their sheltered counterparts. We truly kind of believe in the dignity and inherent worth of every community member. We need things like 24-hour bathrooms for folks that are accessible, and memorial service funding to help provide support to community members and providers when folks pass away. We know that it is less expensive to fill system gaps than to continue at our current pace. And with the commitments that Carrboro has made, that our communities have made to really ensuring an equitable and just system, we can't afford not to continue investing. That is the end of my presentation. You all know how to find me. Happy to entertain questions, comments.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's always good to get this annual update to see how we're doing and to remind us where the gaps still are. And a lot of these gaps have been on the list for a number of years. Do council members have questions? Sammy?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate getting the update. Just had a couple questions. In terms of the housing helpline hotline, we've been talking about how to offset some of the 911 calls using SORAD as a rapid response, but I'm wondering to what degree, and having a call number, I'm wondering if this is the kind of thing that they could also be working with you on in terms of like maximizing, because one of the challenges is staffing those hotlines. So, so are you in conversation with, I'm blanking on her name, with county person who, Kate Finnegan?
Yeah.
Every day.
Okay. So.
Every day, yes. Yeah, we, so the Partnership to End Homelessness, and particularly the street outreach team, is jointly managed by the partnership and the Criminal Justice Resource Department.
Okay.
And so we also work very closely with the Chapel Hill Crisis Unit, local law enforcement, to both, again, attempt those deflections where we can, where law enforcement is not the most appropriate response. And that is also the perk of the street outreach team, being able to kind of go out, build relationships with folks, de-escalate. I know that some of the Carrboro businesses have been very appreciative of some of the de-escalation skills of the team. I'll say that. Cool. But that's allowed us also to be able to do that coordinated entry, kind of at least get folks in the front door outside of normal business hours.
Okay, great. In terms of that call line, I mean, it sounds like you're in conversations with Caitlin, and that you're probably sussing that out as an opportunity to maximize resources for these kinds of calls, along with like diverting from regular police calls that don't necessarily need police officer response.
Right. So yeah, they're So you see that I would say most certainly with the Chapel Hill Crisis Unit, where calls may come in and folks may need a little bit of that de-escalation before they can kind of get into the headspace required to kind of talk with someone about those next steps. But yeah, we are in constant communication.
Great. We're going to have a work session coming up where we're talking about bathrooms, and I was wondering if you all have identified hotspots where we might want to be considering that, because I know our staff is going to, I think, bring recommendations as to where to locate a downtown bathroom or bathrooms. And so if you have that kind of information, please feel free to forward it to us.
I would be thrilled to do so. There was a pretty active 24-hour bathroom planning process back in 2018, 2019. So I know that plan has been circulating with Chapel Hill Town Council, and they considered that when looking at the new parking deck. But I believe that there's some additional locations and kind of implementation recommendations provided.
Carrboro is included in that map?
It is.
Yeah.
Great. So I presume
Discussions that happened back in 2018 and even earlier than that, when we first started getting really serious about bathroom access. What Carrboro decided at that time, you remember, is that that's why we ended up with the bathrooms on the town commons, right? The new bathrooms there, and of course including an accessible bathroom in the 203 project, be right in the heart of downtown as well. So that was the result of the conversations that we started back in the day about bathroom access in the downtowns, and then, of course Chapel Hill has been having their own conversation about their new deck and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you could just make sure, Mr. Manager, that information's included in our packet for that agenda item. Is that? And then I had a question. I noticed you track race. I was wondering about ethnicity Latinos. Is that something that y'all track?
Yes, we do. And let's see if I have it on that slide. I don't. In the annual report that's in your packet, ethnicity is included there.
Okay,
We persistently have seen that Latinx folks have been underrepresented in the formal homeless service system. I will say the data that I submitted to HUD on Friday was the first time that I've seen that percentage increase from 2% to 6%. Again, not at a state of parity yet, but it is a fairly significant increase. And the county considers bilingual and bicultural staffing when looking at hiring practices. And so we have, I know that our housing helpline has brought on additional bilingual and bicultural with Spanish staff on housing helpline, and that is also something we've been looking at with our street outreach team.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sammy. I'm going to go down the line. Randy, Susan, and Eleazar.
First, Rachel, thank you so very, very much for the work that you and your team do. It's really important. I want to ask, I couldn't tell from the written material and what you said whether or not folks who are in encampments are part of the homeless number, or is that a separate number that you look at?
That's a great question, Councilmember. Folks who are in encampments are considered part of that count. They would be considered part of an unsheltered count. We have, I'm trying to think, there was a significant encampment on the Wallace parking deck when I first started, the summer of 2021. And the street outreach team was working in tandem with other partners when there were efforts to close that down. And I know that there have been kind of pop-up encampments as from time to time, certainly at the IFC Commons. We've worked with staff there to, again, ensure that folks are provided support and are kind of connecting with the street outreach team or other resources to develop a housing plan. I'm not going to get into the reasons that folks may choose to remain in an unsheltered community rather than going into a congregate sheltered setting. We know that congregate shelters are not the pathway we need to moving forward. We learned a lot of lessons in COVID. But to the question, yes, folks who are living in encampments would be counted as unsheltered, just the way that folks would be who are living in their cars or in abandoned buildings or other unsheltered locations.
And what is the, I've never really seen this in a report, that there is a cogent county and municipal game plan for heat and excessive cold, the two key seasons. Where is that?
Indeed. There were a series of community conversations in December, starting in December, around cold weather. So prior to coming on board the partnership, my understanding was that oftentimes the IFC congregate shelter was not necessarily at capacity. There was a history of underutilization, and so that was always kind of an option for folks who were interested in entering a sheltered setting during cold weather events. In the fall and winter of 2020 into 2021, and then same 2021 into 2022, there was non-congregate hotel rooms. The IFC Commons was the IFC shelter was operating that. Last winter, the county primarily was funding non-congregate cold weather expansion. And so this year we really found ourselves in a tight spot. And so we are working with partners across the towns. In talking with town staff and staff in Chapel Hill, we were told basically come back to us in June so we can develop a more robust plan. Those partners starting in December and January had identified a number of locations and were, I think, working through some of the hurdles as to why, what space would be kind of the best fit from an accessibility standpoint and a fire safety standpoint. We ultimately used the Southern Human Services Center when the weather got below 33 degrees from January through kind of the end of that cold weather season. And so we served, I think we had, I can double check, but we had we were operational 8 to 10 nights in January, February, March, and served, it was about 45 people. But if you're interested, I can get that information to you.
Yeah, I think it's always, an add-on when the weather occurs. That's ridiculous.
Which it always occurs. Yes.
Exactly. So, and it also, and I don't want to minimize the excessive heat in the summer, because we do not have, in Carrboro anyway, we don't have, pools or spray pads that people can go cool off. Mm-hmm. And so I would really like to see, going into the summer and definitely in the fall, that something is organized and ready to go before we hit December. It does not make any sense to say, oh my goodness, it's going to be 16 degrees. We better find some place, and then try and Band-Aid. We talk about dignity of services, that it's planning, and I'm just saying this because the municipalities have space where, if nothing else, in the heat, they could create spray tents. Mm-hmm. In the winter, if they had to, I'm a former New Yorker, way former, but I'm a New Yorker, you could set up tents with heat lamps. I mean, you can do this. There just needs to be a coordinated effort to say, we're not going to wait. We're going to know that this is going to come up and have plan A. So I'm just putting it out there, because every year it becomes this issue, and what do folks in the community do? They're trying to go around and collect coats. Like, are you kidding me? It's so I'm just putting that out there, because every year it happens.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, and then Eleazar.
Thank you, Rachel, for your presentation this evening, and also for all of the good work you do. We're very lucky to have you. One question deals with the pandemic. During the pandemic, just this huge amounts of money coming to localities from the federal government. And this helped certainly with having more staffing. Mm-hmm. And also it helped a lot of community members in terms of higher unemployment benefits and eviction moratoriums and higher SNAP benefits, and all of these programs are now they've expired over time, and just recently the SNAP benefit SNAP benefits have returned to their pre-pandemic levels. So I'm just curious how things have settled out now. It looks like the point in time numbers stopped at 2022, but if you have any even anecdotal insight into what's happening now that all of the support we were getting at the federal level is, we're having to wean ourselves from that, return to normal. And also, I'm just curious, what does this mean in terms of staffing?
Yeah, great question. I think a perfect illustration of that is that we are winding down our emergency solutions COVID funding at this point. We used that funding source to ramp up the street outreach team, our rapid rehousing program, a homelessness prevention program, and the homelessness prevention program wound down past tense about 2 weeks ago. Luckily, we had a vacancy for a SOAR caseworker, which is a fast track for Social Security disability benefits and Medicaid for people experiencing homelessness. So we were basically able to recommission that staff member who had a lot of experience and a lot of skill into that very needed role. Otherwise, though, we know that during times of economic downturn, housing tends to be a lagging indicator. Folks will fall behind on rent. Folks will kind of pay other bills and figure things out. And we have seen demand for homeless services and homelessness prevention services. It's not flagging. I'll say that. The housing helpline is staying as busy now as they were a year ago or 2 years ago. At the same time, eligibility criteria for emergency rental assistance and utility assistance has really winnowed. It used to be more generous. There were not annual caps. There was a more generous income kind of AMI limit. And so we are really, as a community, continuing to make difficult choices and continuing to prioritize people who are currently experiencing homelessness to try to quickly resolve that as much as possible. So for people who are currently experiencing homelessness, we're able to waive some of those caps and income requirements and things of that nature. But we've had to really pivot. I will say at the same time, as we wound down our emergency solutions COVID funds for rapid rehousing, the county was awarded Continuum of Care rapid rehousing funds. And so we're able to use those funds for 2 case manager salaries and able to identify a new HUD source for rental assistance through tenant-based rental assistance through home. Not exactly a perfect match, but again, sometimes we have to try to get as creative as we can to help meet the need.
Mm-hmm.
But demand is not flagging.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. And also just to add, I hope we can find that funding in a creative way for the crisis diversion facility. And sounds like there's an architectural design process now going that will be happening for that.
There is, yeah. There was a presentation last Friday and then again on Monday. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that, but yeah.
I encourage y'all to get in touch with Kate Van Hagen's group. She can share information with you about the design, the work that's going on now for the diversion facility.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah,
thank you for everything. Mm-hmm.
Susan, Eleazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for the presentation, all the work you do. Extremely important. And I just, actually, Councilmember Slade beat me. I was going to ask around Latinx like representation when it comes to some of your numbers. I think I missed it in the packet. But you mentioned that there's a significant increase, right, in folks or Latinx folks accessing services. So I wanted to see kind of a follow-up. Do you know what some of those reasons are? Is it something going on in community or or circumstances changing dramatically, or is it that we now have people that they can actually talk to, so we're seeing the numbers grow? But I was wondering if you have some insight there.
Yeah, great question. And so again, those the numbers I referenced, the increase from 2% up to 6% is from the point in time count that was just conducted in January of this year. And So I think part of what you're asking would involve a measure of speculation, but I do think that has been some significantly more likely to kind of reach Latinx community members by having bilingual, bicultural staff members on multiple housing programs, and by being in person, particularly at the IFC Commons, I think has been very helpful in reaching out to folks who might not normally kind of come into contact or call the housing helpline. But I do think that we have some room to grow when it comes to further engagement with touchstones and kind of trusted partners within the Latinx community.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that, because I think I've seen this multiple times in other programs where, oh, we didn't have any Latinx representation. Well, people didn't really know that that's a thing, right? So sometimes it's a factor of also need increases, but also the fact that the service is now accessible to folks is why we see some of these numbers increase. So I do thank you for that. I encourage that continues, not just with folks who may speak Spanish, or Spanish might be a primary language, but other folks in community as you do that work. And I would just ask, so who are some of your trusted partners who are helping you in this as we reach out to, or as you reach out, because you're doing the work, as y'all reach out to different sectors of our community?
El Centro has been a significant part, as well as the Family Success Alliance. The Dana, the director of the Family Success Alliance, we've been kind of working a bit more in tandem, I would say, around a variety of, the community health needs assessments, and just I think there's been stronger partnership there over the last year or so, and I think there's continued room.
Well, thank you so much again for your work and your presentation, and yeah, thanks. Ms. Mayor?
So as we come to the end of this agenda item, I just want to also thank Barbara for representing the town council on the leadership team for the partnership. I know that
chair,
and is currently their chair, that's right, and also on the executive team for the partnership, which keeps us well represented with this work. So your report is received. Thank you
Wonderful.
so much for being here. Yes, go ahead, Barbara.
So I'm seeing in the report and knew already since 2017, I believe, so 4 gaps, have been filled, if I remember correctly, with multiple gaps unfilled. I believe your slide said, what was it, like 15 or so? And so, it's good to be concerned and appreciate the presentation and stuff. All that is good. But all this takes money and it takes funding. And so I'm just kind of reminding that we're going to be talking budget starting next week, and to just please keep this, on your radar, because stuff like this, it requires money. Did you want to mention anything about the budget expansion or anything like that, the expansion budget? Or if that's what you want to call it. You probably may not want to call it that, but the budget that we, yeah.
So the budget that staff have received is a partnership continuation budget that is reflective of kind of the 3 housing homeless programs coordinator, homeless programs manager, housing access coordinator. It also is a continuation of funding request for the street outreach team. The housing locator, which is the dollar request is 0 right now, but that is a continuation position, as well as partial request for rapid rehousing. Again, as we kind of talk about braiding funding and getting creative with funding sources, we've continued to do that with both HUD funding, but also foundation funding, and recently got a no-cost extension for our Foundation for Health Leadership Innovation that's helped pay for our housing locator. So I would say from the partnership continuation budget request that those are those key elements. When it comes to expansion, the leadership team heard a presentation last month around particular expansion for permanent supportive housing, and the force magnifier it could be to have some local investments in a permanent supportive housing program, because it's able to use those funds for a match to enable the provider to apply for more homeless fund dollars. And just, continue to expand that program that, as I said, has accepted capacity for 2 additional households in the last year.
So, so thank you, Rachel. I'm sorry about that. I don't know, wordsmithing or whatever, expansion, continuation, more money. I mean, I don't know what to say. And thank you for all your work. The way that you lead this group is exemplary. I enjoy working with you, and you are definitely a valued asset. So thank you.
That, Councilmember. Thanks so much.
Hi, girl.
Thanks, Barbara, and thank you, Rachel. And just so folks know, when we have our work session on the budget next week, the manager will be including, as part of that conversation, information about the continuation budget from the partnership. Thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Manager, on to the next item, please.
The next item is the 2023 Carrboro Brand Guidelines. The purpose of the 2023 Carrboro Brand Guidelines is to update the guidelines to include new Carrboro brands for seasonal observances that will be used in marketing, email signatures, and downtown banners. The update also creates a refresh of the Carrboro Feel Free tagline to Feel Free to Be, and creates this message in additional languages, including Spanish, Burmese, and others. And there is a resolution for council to adopt the guidelines if you so choose.
Welcome, Kat.
Catherine, yes. Lazorko, our Community Engagement Director, is here to provide an overview.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you. I am here tonight with Lane Worcester of the Splinter Group. I'm just going to open this up and then really let Lane take it away. Yes, we're here to discuss the Carrboro brand guidelines, and you might remember we were before you last fall, and we had revisited the guidelines at that time. As a result, we developed a new government logo, which basically has the core emblem with Town of Carrboro, NC. And we've developed new stationery and business cards and things like that. And we also heard from you that you wanted some additional things addressed in the guidelines. So that's why we're here tonight. And so the goals of this update are really to establish new Carrboro brands for seasonal observances that will be used in marketing, in email signatures, and downtown banners. It also establishes additional secondary logos in 5 colors to include Town of Carrboro, NC. And we're also proposing a refresh of the Carrboro Feel Free tagline to Feel Free to Be, and creating this message in additional languages, including Spanish, Burmese, and others. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lane.
Welcome back, Lane.
Hey, folks.
Hey. Hello.
Hey, Council. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you. Thank you, Kat. So yes, we were here last year to do some updating to the brand guidelines, and brands are always sort of evolving and living things, so I think it's really important to revisit them from time to time and check in and see how they're doing. As part of our last round of enhancements to the brand guide, we added the Town of Carrboro, NC to the core logos. The middle logo you see in green is really the definitive town mark. But we also, from our previous brand guide, had 5 other supporting colors that can be used for the brand. So this was sort of a baby step of just bringing the Town of Carrboro, NC into those other colored marks. As a reminder, these were the original colors that were in the brand guide. As we go through everything, we'll eventually, hopefully upon approval, go back and update the brand guide with all these small steps that you'll see. One of the big topics that came out of our last meeting involved the town values and marketing logos that are used to promote seasonal events and observances. This is the old page from the brand guide showing a few of these designs. The council expressed interest in creating custom logos to celebrate and commemorate additional events. And so to that end, we researched official colors that are connected to these events and groups and created a set of logos that have distinct color treatments but share a visual continuity, always a goal of good branding. Here's a quick look at the proposed additional logos, followed by larger views of each of them. Now, these values and marketing logos can be used for banners, event posters, email signatures, and more. One of the specific logo evolutions since we last met is the Pride logo, which now features an enhanced colored palette to be even more inclusive. Speaking of banner applications, you'll see several instances here of initial mock-ups. Stay tuned for more information from communications and engagement about these. This sort of shows how the color treatments we've come up with for the event logos could translate into banners that could hang through town. So super excited about these new color treatments, preserving the continuity to the logo, to the marks, but bringing the different colors with to reflect each of the seasonal events and observances. At the tail end of our last meeting about the brand, there was discussion about taking another look at the Feel Free tagline. There was a desire to make the tagline more concrete, more of a finished thought, and less of a vague phrase. Our initial intent for its Carrboro Feel Free was to both sort of feel unencumbered, but also to have an invitation to explore. Sort of a two-pronged thing that it's about a freedom from judgment and pessimism, and a freedom to step up and be original, to be more than you thought you could be. Not necessarily as an indulgent phrase, but it was supposed to convey more of hospitality. Feel free, you're in Carrboro. So both feel free to challenge yourself, feel free to explore, an invitation of hospitality and welcome. We discussed adding "to be" to the tagline. In response to a question about the context, we thought adding those words might sort of solidify and give it more weight, more of a stop to the phrase. So feel free to be, to complete the thought. So with this, we're saying feel free to be yourself. You be you, emphasizing the respect for individuality and honoring the differences and encouraging acceptance. So really to encourage this sense of authentic being when you're in our community. And though it wasn't really our original intent, and we've also subtly connected with the state motto of "to be" rather than "to seem." So this idea of being authentic, solidifying one's sense of self through this environment that Carrboro provides. The tagline, the way taglines work, I think, in good branding, I feel like we already have a real strong logo that does tell a story about sort of individuality and creativity, but our tagline is meant to sort of heighten and extend that brand experience. So really good ones, I think, make you think a little bit and maybe think twice about what that meaning is. The more the better, I believe. So we also are showing this new tagline. Let's see. In different languages. Cat sort of made a remix for us. That was the Feel Free to Be remix. So I want to know if you all had any questions about what was just presented. I think there were some really sort of simple things at the beginning in terms of those color enhancements. Then we moved into the event logos, and then finally, Feel Free, I think, is obviously a larger topic.
Thanks so much, Lane. First of all, I just want to appreciate Kat Lozorko and her team and the work that she's done with you and your team at Splinter to get us back here and respond to some of the feedback you heard last time. As I said last time, I love looking at brand guidelines because it's the kind of thing that we do in my my real life. So it's fun to see how other people pull these things together. So I love the refreshed, the logo, the new color palettes, the way of expanding their use for different purposes and so on. I'm going to be honest about the tagline. It feels almost a little fussy to talk too much more about it, frankly. And I'm not sure I totally feel like there's an appreciable difference between the one that people are familiar with, the Feel Free tagline, and the one that's been shown here as a new option. I remember at the end of our last conversation when this came up, and Eleazar had this really great idea of having multiple language options. That to me seemed like a great way to sort of talk about the accessibility of this logo, this mark, and this tagline, and to really stress what it's trying to do is to be inclusive, to sort of have that open feel to it. So I personally am fine with Feel Free, and I love the idea of having Feel Free in multiple languages. I love it being included when needed. It sounds to me like it's not even meant to be used very often, really as sort of almost tourism.
That's correct. It's more
package.
of a tourism and marketing mark. Yeah, so it fits under that marketing and values category.
So, and this, council members, this is just where I'm sitting with it. I feel like that you all have done great work in refreshing the brand. Getting into more spinning our wheels about the tagline almost feels, you mentioned it's not meant to be self-indulgent. It feels indulgent for us as a council, not for you, but for us as a council to kind of keep spinning wheels around that. Especially given that I think you've done such a great job of being responsive to Eleazar's suggestion in the last conversation of really making it more inclusive with the branding. So that's how I feel about it. I'm happy with what you've done here. This is a great opportunity in my mind for the council to be like, great job, let's move on. But certainly open to having council members weigh in on their feelings about it. Randy, and then Randy.
Yeah, I love that the refresh the colors with the months and the season. Number one, and yes, Eleazar, you're exactly right. Having the multiple languages makes all the difference to the sense of inclusion. I just want to, I don't know, let me go with this first because this is simple and it follows the way you laid it out. Earth Month. We've got an O in Carrboro. Stick the globe in there. No, seriously, I mean, for the films,
Right.
We have the film canister. Was there a logo for or a color scheme for the Women's Month? Did I see that? 'Cause
Yes,
it wasn't in here.
That was the purple. This is the purple and green.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, Kat, if there's something, the O, a symbol for woman, right?
One of the things that we did struggle with a little bit was how far to take that so that we didn't have some with additional marks, some without. I think the one with bikes, we had sort of the trailing stream to give a sense of motion. Now, we did talk about with Film Festival, perhaps trying to bring the reels in there. And I think this is just something where we had a little bit of internal struggle ourselves of how do we preserve this brand continuity? And we thought the color stripes might be the best way to marry that.
That doesn't say women to me.
So,
I'm sorry. I'm just sorry.
Yeah.
It's like, we've got 50%, 52% of our population is women. The color scheme does not say women. It says actually, Chapel Hill Preppy. I can't.
Preppy handbook.
Right. You remember. And I actually remember, Marlo Thomas. I really thought you were going to play her, but I'm just saying it. You can do it subtly, but
yeah.
I just think if you're talking about women, don't be shy about it, because that's the one thing that always happens with women. We always apologize and we always are shy about uplifting them. So I don't want that to happen. If you're going to bother to do that. But other than that, I love it because it pops. But I think also and this is interesting because with the comment about, and the redirection to multiple languages, what's fascinating about language is that in multiple languages, keeping it simple, feel free, is probably the smartest thing to do so that it's not interpreted differently in different languages. So I want to be really, I want to put that out there and say, I like feel free, just leave it as it is. It says whatever people want it to say, and it can't be really misinterpreted when you start to add other words. I agree with Damon, but I thank you for just, dusting it off and making it shine.
Great. Well, we can definitely take a look at bringing some other elements in here. So I appreciate that comment.
Thank you, Randy. Susan and then Danny.
Thank you, Lane, and I'm part of this consensus here. I really love the color enhancements. I appreciate Eleazar's recommendations, making this more inclusive. I too really like just the feel free. I will say on the feel free that Randy's comment about less likely to have misunderstandings. I really loved your quote that was on one of the slides on what you were thinking when you came up with Feel Free. And I mentioned it because I wondered if that could be put on our website somewhere, just so when questions come up about this, it would be easy to refer folks to a spot on the website or what have you, where we're kind of it is there.
You mentioned that last
you're one
time,
step
and-
ahead of me then.
No, actually,
Yeah.
last meeting, when we talked about the brand in October, you requested that. So it is under communication and engagement, under brand guidelines.
Thank you for doing that. I looked and didn't see it, but I really appreciate you doing that. So, the other thing I wanted to say, this is kind of being in the northern suburbs where we're not always part of all of the downtown stuff. I'm very excited about the downtown banners. I wondered, I have no idea how expensive these are, but I wondered about bringing some to the greenways, and whether it's the Bowling Creek or Morgan Creek or the Jones Creek greenways, with poles, obviously, but we have so many annex neighborhoods on the northern part of town, and first of all, it's amazing how many people don't realize they're Carrboro. But secondly, just letting folks, it's a reminder that our greenways come through, in part through taxpayers of Carrboro, and also they're just beautiful banners. So I was going to throw that out as well, just for your suggestion.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you both.
Next, I have Danny and then Eleazar.
Yes, thank you. This is wonderful to see. So appreciate the work. And Damon, your point is very well taken. That we have discussed this quite a bit. I did just want to offer, I really appreciate, Randy, what you're saying about trying to make sure that we honor every month sort of as fully as possible. But I do personally kind of wonder about messing with the O a little bit. I think traditionally with branding marks, we don't want to run the risk of sort of diluting the mark and sort of the seal. This already kind of has some whimsy to it intentionally, and I think when you start to mess with sort of like the core elements of the O and sort of what is sort of intrinsic to any brand logo like this, I think most brands, that have a lot of equity in them are often kind of fussy about, Nike doesn't make a transparent swoosh and things like that, just because you kind of want to leave it as is. And so to my mind, the film, the one note I would add would be to back off really all instances of doing that. And, even the bike bleed, it does bring a smile to my face, but that would be like as far personally as I would want it to go. I don't feel super strongly. I totally hear the other point. But I did just want to offer.
We did have a hard time coming up with bike colors. What color are bikes?
But to that end, I think your wisdom is well taken here to err understated with the O's.
To your point, these logos that you see will not stand alone. They're usually going to be used in some other kind of marketing collateral. So maybe it's in a social media post with, pictures of, prominent women in the community, for example.
Perhaps like in the banner context.
And
like
so then we'll have the logo in the corner, for example, but they wouldn't necessarily, the logo wouldn't just stand alone as a mark all unto itself.
Thanks, Kat. So you've heard, I think Lane heard sort of Randy's comment about seeing what you might come up with for that particular one. I'm assuming the colors you chose is because those are the colors associated with Women's History Month, right?
Exactly, yes.
So,
Yeah, so-
but maybe if there is some, if you do have a brilliant idea of, treating it in a new way that would get to the concern Randy raised, I think that would be valid. Next on the list is Eleazar and then Barbara.
Yeah. First, gracias. I think I can't believe it was already so long ago.
A year ago.
That we, yeah.
Good idea.
But thank you all for putting that. Just want to say thank you on that one. I think, as I'm looking through logos, I love the changes you've made. I think kind of reflecting a little bit of the conversation earlier. When I looked up like colors for Women's History Month, and it's like a purple and a green. I think maybe it's just the screen, but it looks a little bit bluish to me. Yeah, it might be the monster.
It's a little
I don't know. But then also like when I was looking at the Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm like, those also doesn't like just looking at it alone, I'm just like, I don't know about that. But then seeing that in the banner and like the context behind it, now I'm like, all right, I see that, and I have no problem with it. I think it's cool. But I just wanted to chime in on. I do think we could just keep it siéntete libre, feel free, be done with it. And I just wanted to again say thank you so much for actually taking up that suggestion and running with it. I think it was awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Barbara, you're next.
Thank you. And thank you for your work. I'm good with everything but the tagline. But the majority obviously is fine with the tagline. I'm still of the mindset of why we even need one. I think the tagline is still subjective and open to interpretation, although I appreciate the explanation that was given, because I think about intent versus impact. I know for me, it's my hope that we will continue to be a community on the move, which would mean leaving some things behind for a more transformative way of working in local government. Our community sees who we are, and they see what we're doing. So I think about our decision-making racial equity tool and the answers to the pocket questions. In my mind, it does not align with what's being proposed here as it relates to the tagline. It doesn't support it. So I think if we're really truly trying to repair past damages to community and prevent further damage, then the answer is even clearer to me. I believe in connecting the dots and allowing the race equity tools to guide our work and our decision making. I've not heard one thing about either one of those tonight. I realize they're done, but I haven't heard anything. And so in my mind, the race equity tools speak, and they speak for the marginalized and underserved community members, and hopefully giving them more of a voice in local government. And so I'm in the same position with the tagline, but I'm with the mayor. I don't want that, to stop, because obviously the majority of the council is in favor with proceeding with this fully, which is fine with me. But certainly I would be on the other side of the vote for this reason specific. Thank you.
Barbara, thanks for your explanation. Okay, and thanks again, Lane and Kat, for all the good work. Branding is always happening. It's always going on, always being refreshed. Is there a motion regarding what we've heard today? There's a resolution in the packet, although it sounds like the majority wants to tweak that with regard to the tagline. Somebody like to make a motion? Eleazar?
Move to approve the resolution with the amendment of using the feel free tagline rather than the feel free to be.
Moved by Eleazar and seconded by Susan, and you heard the amendment, Mr. Clerk. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
Nay.
Thank you. Matter passes 6 votes to 1. All right, Mr. Manager, on to the next item.
It's appointments to the Carrboro Tourism Development Authority and selecting a chairperson.
Okay. Do we have, we don't have need for a ballot tonight. It's mainly because of selecting the chairperson and all that. And
that's the reason it's on other matters. Yep.
Okay, so we have a resolution indicating that we would appoint Bridget Pemberton Smith to a 1-year term on the Tourism Development Authority, and we would reappoint, I know there was some confusion. Can you remind us?
Yep, it's Marlon Flood instead of Donald Strickland. There was a typo on the resolution, so it's Marlon Flood.
Thank you. And can you also remind us, Mr. Clerk, who the current chair is?
Well, they only currently have one member, so
it's Donald.
Yeah.
It's
Donald
Donald.
Strickland was the chair, but he is no longer on the TDA. So
So it will only be these two people. Are there? Oh, okay. Do they have they indicated? Well, there's only one of these people who's currently on the
I would say that Marlon Flood would be because he's already on the
He's
committee.
already on the
so-
committee. Right. So I think it would make sense for us to select
moved.
Marlon as the chair.
Second.
Okay, moved by Sammy and seconded by Eleazar that we adopt the resolution appointing Marlon Flood and Bridget Pemberton Smith and selecting Marlon Flood as chair. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously.
There we go.
Okay. Are there any matters by council members before we adjourn?
A quick question, Mr. Manager, the noise ordinance for two-stroke engines, is that on the horizon before summer break?
Yes, we're working on putting that together to get it to council.
Before summer break?
That's the goal, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. Randy?
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up something that came through in emails and just officially ask the manager to reach out to OWASA for a presentation date before we take off for this.
Thanks for that reminder, Randy. Do you have,
I
Mr.
can
Clerk,
speak
do
to
you have a
that.
reminder of our update?
Have been in touch with their clerk of the board, and they are working on getting. I've given them some dates, and she'll get back to me before the summer break.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's been our typical schedule is we get a spring annual report from our board members. So.
And they're going to make a reminder on their end for an annual update between March to May.
Awesome.
Sometime.
Okay, and I appreciated receiving the written quarterly report as well.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, moved by Sammy that we adjourn.
Wait.
Oh,
Sorry.
Eleazar, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, Mr. Mayor, the procedures manual, where we're at with that.
I have revisions from a couple of council members. My goal is so then I'll be sending those to the manager once that final draft is done, and then it will be reviewed by our chief racial equity officer, and then it will come to council for hopefully adoption
Do you have a timeline?
in June.
All right, perfect.
That's what I hope.
I'll
Requires me to
second.
send it to Richard first, but
I'll second Councilmember Slade's motion to adjourn.
all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Danny, have a great birthday.